The Galactic Summit, a grand gathering of species from across the universe, was in full swing. Delegates from countless worlds mingled and exchanged pleasantries, each eager to forge new alliances and learn about the myriad civilizations that called the galaxy home. Amidst the throng of exotic beings, the humans, relative newcomers to the galactic stage, stood out with their simple, unassuming appearance. Max, a young human diplomat, found himself captivated by the kaleidoscope of alien life surrounding him. He marveled at the towering, crystalline beings from the planet Zephyria, their faceted bodies refracting the light in dazzling displays. He watched in awe as the serpentine Charon delegates undulated gracefully through the crowd, their iridescent scales shimmering with every movement. As Max made his way through the summit hall, he couldn't help but overhear the whispers that followed him. The other delegates spoke of the Zorgans, a species whose very name seemed to evoke a mixture of fear and reverence. They were known as the most lethal predators in the galaxy, their prowess in battle and ruthless efficiency legendary among the stars. Intrigued by the fearsome reputation of the Zorgans, Max found himself drawn to the stories being told about them. He listened intently as a grizzled old diplomat from the Arcturus system recounted tales of Zorgan conquests, of entire worlds falling before their might. The diplomat spoke of their razor-sharp claws, capable of slicing through the toughest armor, and their eyes, said to burn with an unquenchable thirst for dominance. Despite the warnings and cautionary tales, Max's curiosity only grew. He knew that if humanity was to find its place among the stars, they would need to understand and engage with all species, even those as intimidating as the Zorgans. With a determined stride, Max set off to find the Zorgan delegation, eager to learn more about these mysterious predators. As he navigated the crowded summit hall, Max couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He scanned the room, his eyes searching for the source of the sensation, when he suddenly found himself face to face with a towering figure clad in jet-black armor. The being's eyes, a piercing amber, seemed to bore into Max's very soul. Human, the figure growled, its voice a low, menacing rumble. You are bold to approach the Zorgan delegation uninvited. Max swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He had heard stories of the Zorgan's fearsome reputation, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer presence of the being standing before him. Yet despite his fear, Max found himself strangely drawn to the Zorgan, his curiosity overriding his instinct for self-preservation. I am Max, a diplomat from Earth, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. I come in peace, seeking to learn about your people and your culture. The Zorgan regarded Max for a long moment, its amber eyes unreadable. Then, to Max's surprise, the being let out a low, rumbling chuckle. You have courage, human, the Zorgan said, a hint of amusement in its voice. I am Thrax, leader of the Zorgan delegation. If you truly wish to learn about us, then follow me. But be warned, our ways are not for the faint of heart. With those words, Thrax turned and strode away, his black cape billowing behind him. Max hesitated for a moment, the weight of the Zorgan's warning hanging heavy in the air. But his curiosity and determination won out, and he found himself following in Thrax's footsteps, ready to embark on a journey that would change his life forever. As Max and Thrax disappeared into the depths of the summit hall, the other delegates watched in stunned silence. They had never seen a human so boldly approach a Zorgan before, and they couldn't help but wonder what fate awaited the young diplomat. Little did they know, Max's courage and curiosity would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Max followed Thrax through the winding corridors of the galactic summit, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The Zorgan leader moved with a predatory grace, his every step deliberate and purposeful. Max struggled to keep up, his human physique no match for the Zorgan's natural agility. As they walked, Max couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology that surrounded them. The walls were lined with holographic displays, each one showcasing the achievements of a different galactic civilization. Max's eyes widened as he saw images of towering megastructures, vast fleets of starships, and planetary terraforming projects that defied the very laws of nature. Thrax led Max to a secluded chamber, far from the bustle of the main summit hall. The room was dimly lit, with a large, circular table dominating the center. Thrax motioned for Max to take a seat, then settled himself opposite the human. "So, Max of Earth," Thrax began, his amber eyes glinting in the low light, "what do you wish to know about the Zorgans?" Max leaned forward, his curiosity overriding his nerves. "Everything," he said eagerly. "Your history, your culture, your technology. I want to understand what makes the Zorgans the most feared and respected species in the galaxy." Thrax chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent shivers down Max's spine. "You are bold, human. Most species cower in fear at the mere mention of our name. But very well, I shall indulge your curiosity." And so, Thrax began to speak. He told Max of the Zorgans' ancient origins, of how they had evolved on a harsh, unforgiving world where only the strongest and most cunning survived. He spoke of their early forays into space, of how they had quickly established themselves as a force to be reckoned with. As Thrax spoke, Max listened intently, absorbing every word. He marveled at the complexity of Zorgan society, at the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that shaped their political landscape. He learned of their advanced technologies, of the devastating weapons and impenetrable defenses that had made them the undisputed masters of the battlefield. But what fascinated Max most was the Zorgans' unique philosophy, a worldview that prized strength, honor, and loyalty above all else. Thrax spoke of the sacred bonds between Zorgan warriors, of the unbreakable oaths that bound them together in life and death. As the hours passed, Max found himself drawn deeper and deeper into the Zorgan world. He asked questions, seeking to understand the nuances of their culture, and Thrax answered with a frankness and honesty that surprised the human diplomat. In turn, Thrax found himself intrigued by Max's own stories of Earth and humanity. He listened with rapt attention as Max spoke of his species' tumultuous history, of the wars and conflicts that had nearly torn them apart, but also of the great triumphs and achievements that had propelled them to the stars. As the two talked, a bond began to form between them. Max realized that beneath the Zorgans' fearsome exterior lay a complex and fascinating people, while Thrax saw in Max a kindred spirit, a being who sought to understand rather than to judge. When at last their conversation drew to a close, Thrax rose from his seat, towering over Max. "You have learned much today, Max of Earth," he said, his voice tinged with respect. "But there is still much more to discover. If you truly wish to understand the Zorgans, you must see our world through our eyes." With those words, Thrax extended a clawed hand to Max. "Come with me to Zorguria, to the heart of our civilization. There you will learn what it truly means to be Zorgan." Max hesitated for only a moment before grasping Thrax's hand, sealing the bond between them. He knew that the journey ahead would be perilous, that he would be tested in ways he could scarcely imagine. But he also knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a chance to bridge the gap between two vastly different species and forge a new path for the galaxy. As Max and Thrax strode out of the chamber, side by side, the human diplomat couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew that he was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. As Max stepped off the shuttle onto the surface of Zorguria, he was immediately struck by the sheer alienness of the planet. The sky was a deep, brooding red, and the landscape was a jagged maze of towering black spires and gaping chasms. The air was thick and heavy, and Max found himself struggling to breathe in the oppressive atmosphere. Beside him, Thrax stood tall and proud, his amber eyes gleaming with a fierce intensity. "Welcome to my world, Max of Earth," he said, his voice a low growl. "This is where the Zorgans were forged, in the crucible of our planet's harsh embrace." Max nodded, his eyes wide with wonder and trepidation. He had known that Zorgaria would be unlike anything he had ever experienced, but the reality of it was almost overwhelming. As they made their way through the twisting passageways of the Zorgan citadel, Max couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the place. The walls were carved from the same black stone as the spires outside, and were adorned with intricate glyphs and symbols that Max could only guess at the meaning of. Thrax led Max to a vast chamber at the heart of the citadel, where a group of Zorgan warriors were gathered around a massive circular table. As they entered, the warriors turned to face them, their eyes narrowing as they caught sight of Max. "This is the human I spoke of," Thrax said, his voice ringing out in the cavernous space. "Max of Earth, who seeks to understand our ways." There was a moment of tense silence, and then one of the warriors stepped forward, his clawed hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "The human," he growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "What could a soft, weak creature like this hope to learn from us?" Max felt a flare of anger at the warrior's words, but he forced himself to remain calm. He knew that he would have to prove himself to the Zorgans, to show them that he was more than just a curious outsider. "I may be human," Max said, his voice steady and clear, "but I am not weak. I have come here to learn, to understand the Zorgan way of life, and I will not be deterred by insults or challenges." The warrior stared at Max for a long moment, then let out a low, rumbling chuckle. "Bold words, human," he said. "But words are cheap. If you truly wish to understand us, you must first prove your worth." With that, the warrior drew his blade and lunged at Max, his eyes flashing with a predatory gleam. Max barely had time to react before the warrior was upon him, the razor-sharp edge of his blade slicing through the air with a deadly precision. But Max was not defenseless. He had spent years training in various forms of combat, and his reflexes were honed to a fine edge. He dodged the warrior's first strike, then countered with a swift kick to the Zorgan's midsection. The warrior grunted in surprise, but quickly recovered, pressing his attack with renewed ferocity. Max fought back with all his skill and determination, his mind racing as he sought to find a way to end the fight without causing serious harm. In the end, it was Thrax who intervened, stepping between the two combatants with a growl of annoyance. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "The human has proven his courage and his skill. He is worthy of our respect." The warrior hesitated for a moment, then lowered his blade, bowing his head in deference to Thrax's authority. Max, breathing heavily from the exertion of the fight, felt a surge of gratitude towards the Zorgan leader. In the days that followed, Max immersed himself in the Zorgan way of life. He trained with their warriors, learning the intricacies of their fighting techniques and the secrets of their advanced weaponry. He studied their history and culture, marveling at the complexity and richness of their society. And through it all, Thrax was there, guiding and mentoring Max, sharing with him the wisdom and knowledge of his people. As the two spent more and more time together, the bond between them deepened, growing into a friendship that transcended the vast differences between their species. Max knew that he still had much to learn, that the path ahead would be long and difficult. But with Thrax by his side, he felt a sense of purpose and determination that he had never known before. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, to forge a new future for himself and for the galaxy. As Max delved deeper into the Zorgan way of life, he found himself increasingly drawn to their ancient traditions and customs. One of the most intriguing of these was the Zorgan hunt, a sacred ritual that tested the skills and courage of the planet's greatest warriors. When Thrax invited Max to participate in the hunt, the human diplomat knew that it was a rare and precious opportunity. He also knew that it would be a challenge unlike any he had ever faced before. The day of the hunt dawned bright and clear, the red sky of Zorgaria ablaze with the light of the rising sun. Max and Thrax set out from the citadel, accompanied by a small group of Zorgan warriors, each one armed to the teeth with an array of fearsome weapons. As they made their way through the jagged landscape of the planet, Max couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. He had heard stories of the creatures that roamed the wilds of Zorgaria, of the massive, saurian beasts that could tear a man in half with a single swipe of their claws. But Max was determined to prove himself, to show the Zorgans that he was more than just a curious outsider. He had trained hard for this moment, studying the Zorgan hunting techniques and honing his skills with their weapons. As they entered a narrow valley, Thrax signaled for the group to halt. He sniffed the air, his amber eyes narrowing as he scanned the surrounding cliffs. "There," he said, pointing to a shadowy crevice high above them. "Our prey awaits." Max squinted up at the crevice, his heart pounding in his chest. He could just make out the glint of scales and the flash of teeth, and he knew that whatever was lurking up there was not to be trifled with. But before he could say anything, one of the Zorgan warriors let out a bellowing war cry and charged forward, his spear held high. The others followed suit, their roars echoing off the valley walls as they raced towards their prey. Max hesitated for only a moment before joining the fray, his pulse pounding in his ears as he ran. He could hear the creatures roar now, a deafening, bone-shaking sound that seemed to fill the entire valley. And then it was upon them, a massive serpentine beast with scales the color of blood and eyes that glowed with a malevolent intelligence. It lashed out with its tail, sending one of the warriors flying through the air like a rag doll. Max dodged and weaved, his training taking over as he sought to find a weak point in the creature's defenses. He saw Thrax nearby, locked in a deadly dance with the beast, his blade flashing in the sunlight as he parried and thrust. And then Max saw his chance. The creature's neck was exposed, just for a moment, and he knew that he had to act fast. With a shout of determination, he leaped forward, his spear aimed at the beast's throat. The impact was jarring, and for a moment Max thought he had missed. But then he saw the spear sinking deep into the creature's flesh and heard its roar of pain and anger. The beast thrashed and writhed, its massive body slamming against the valley walls with enough force to shake the ground. But Max held on, gritting his teeth as he drove the spear deeper and deeper. And then, with a final, shuddering gasp, the creature fell still, its lifeblood staining the rocky ground beneath it. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the Zorgan warriors let out a roar of triumph. They surrounded Max, clapping him on the back and shouting his name, their eyes shining with a newfound respect. Thrax stepped forward, his expression one of pride and admiration. "You have proven yourself today, Max of Earth," he said, his voice ringing out over the din of celebration. "You have shown that you possess the heart and spirit of a true warrior." Max felt a surge of emotion at Thrax's words, a sense of belonging and purpose that he had never known before. He knew that he had taken a great step forward in his journey to understand the Zorgan way of life, and that the bonds he had forged with Thrax and his people would only grow stronger in the days to come. As they made their way back to the citadel, the massive carcass of the beast slung between them, Max couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had faced his fears and emerged victorious, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same courage and determination. As Max and Thrax returned to the galactic summit, they were greeted with a sense of unease and tension. The other delegates were gathered in small groups, whispering urgently among themselves, their faces etched with worry and fear. Max and Thrax approached a group of delegates from the Arcturus system, their brows furrowed in concern. "What's going on?" Max asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. The Arcturan delegate, a tall, spindly creature with luminous eyes, turned to face them. "We have received word of a great threat," it said, its voice trembling with fear. "A malevolent entity, known only as the Void, has emerged from the depths of space. It is said to possess unimaginable power, and it seeks to consume all life in the galaxy." Max felt a chill run down his spine at the delegate's words. He had heard whispers of the Void before, but had always dismissed them as mere legends and myths. But now, faced with the grim reality of the situation, he knew that the threat was all too real. As the delegates argued and debated about how to address the Void, Max found himself growing increasingly frustrated. The various species seemed more interested in placing blame and protecting their own interests than in finding a solution to the crisis at hand. It was then that Max had an idea. Drawing on his understanding of Zorgan culture and his friendship with Thrax, he proposed a radical solution, a united front, with the Zorgans at the forefront of the fight against the Void. At first, the other delegates were skeptical. The Zorgans were known for their fierce independence and their disdain for alliances and cooperation. But as Max spoke, his words filled with passion and conviction, they began to see the wisdom in his proposal. Thrax, too, was initially hesitant. The Zorgans had always prided themselves on their self-reliance, and the idea of joining forces with other species was foreign to their way of thinking. But as he listened to Max's arguments, he began to see the necessity of such an alliance. In the end, it was Thrax who convinced the other Zorgans to join the fight. He spoke of the honor and glory that would come from defeating such a powerful foe, and of the respect and admiration that would be heaped upon their people. And so, with the Zorgans at the vanguard, the allied species began to prepare for the coming battle. They pooled their resources and their knowledge, working tirelessly to develop new weapons and strategies to use against the Void. Max found himself at the center of these efforts, his unique perspective and his understanding of both human and Zorgan culture proving invaluable. He worked closely with Thrax and the other leaders, helping to bridge the gaps between the various species and to forge a sense of unity and common purpose. As the day of the final confrontation drew near, Max couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. He knew that the odds were stacked against them, that the Void was a foe unlike any they had ever faced before. But he also knew that they had no choice but to fight. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and it was up to them to defend it, no matter the cost. On the eve of battle, Max and Thrax stood together, looking out over the assembled fleet of ships and warriors. They knew that many of those gathered there would not survive the coming conflict, that the price of victory would be high. But they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, for the very future of the galaxy itself. As the first shots were fired and the battle began, Max felt a surge of adrenaline and determination. He knew that the road ahead would be long and perilous, that there would be moments of doubt and despair. But he also knew that he had Thrax by his side and the strength and courage of the Zorgan people at his back. And with that knowledge, he charged forward into the fray, ready to face whatever lay ahead, no matter the cost. The battle against the Void was unlike anything Max had ever experienced. The malevolent entity seemed to swallow light itself, a vast, impenetrable darkness that stretched across the stars. And yet the allied species fought on, their ships and warriors facing the impossible odds with unwavering courage and determination. At the forefront of the battle were the Zorgans, their fearsome prowess and advanced technology, proving invaluable against the Void's relentless onslaught. Thrax led the charge, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity as he directed his warriors in a deadly dance of fire and fury. Max fought alongside his Zorgan comrades, his human ingenuity and adaptability complementing their raw strength and power. Together, they pushed back against the darkness, their weapons and shields holding fast against the Void's relentless attacks. But the cost of the battle was high. Ships were torn asunder, their crews lost to the unforgiving depths of space. Warriors fell, their lives snuffed out in an instant by the Void's malevolent touch. And yet, even in the face of such devastating losses, the allied species refused to yield. Max and Thrax fought side by side, their bond forged in the crucible of war. They moved as one, anticipating each other's every move, their weapons singing in deadly harmony. And when one faltered, the other was there to lend strength and support, a living embodiment of the unity that bound the allied species together. As the battle raged on, Max began to see a pattern in the Void's attacks, a weakness that could be exploited. With a shout of triumph, he relayed his discovery to Thrax and the other leaders, his words galvanizing the flagging spirits of the allied forces. Together, they mounted a final desperate assault on the Void's core. pouring all of their remaining strength and resources into the attack. Ships and warriors alike threw themselves against the darkness, their sacrifices buying precious seconds for Max and Thrax to strike at the heart of the entity. In that final, fateful moment, Max and Thrax stood together, their weapons raised in defiance against the void. They charged forward, their battle cries echoing across the stars, as they plunged into the heart of the darkness. The explosion that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A blinding flash of light, a shockwave that rippled across the stars. And then, silence. The void was gone, vanquished by the courage and sacrifice of the allied species. But the victory had come at a great cost. As the dust settled and the survivors began to take stock of their losses, the true scale of the devastation became clear. Thousands of ships and warriors had been lost, their lives given in defense of the galaxy. Max and Thrax stood amidst the wreckage, their armor scorched and battered, their eyes haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. They mourned the fallen, the friends and comrades who had given their lives so that others might live. And yet, even in the midst of such sorrow, there was hope. The allied species had proven that they could stand together, that they could overcome even the greatest of threats. And in the bond between Max and Thrax, there was a symbol of that unity, a living embodiment of the power of friendship and understanding. As the survivors began the long process of rebuilding, Max and Thrax made a vow. They would honor the sacrifices of the fallen, and work tirelessly to build a galaxy where such sacrifices would never again be necessary. They would forge a new era of peace and cooperation, a future where all species could stand together as one. And so, as the stars shone down upon them, Max and Thrax set out on a new journey, their hearts filled with hope and determination. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But they also knew that they had each other and the strength and courage of the allied species at their back. And with that knowledge, they stepped forward into the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead, together. In the aftermath of the great battle against the void, the galaxy was forever changed. The allied species, once divided by mistrust and misunderstanding, now stood united in their shared triumph and loss. And at the forefront of this new era of cooperation were Max and Thrax, the unlikely pair whose friendship had helped to turn the tide against the darkness. As the survivors began the long process of rebuilding, Max and Thrax threw themselves into the work with a passion and dedication that inspired all those around them. They traveled from world to world, meeting with leaders and delegates from every corner of the galaxy, working tirelessly to forge new alliances and strengthen existing bonds. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. Across the galaxy, people spoke of the human and the Zorgan who had defied all expectations, who had forged a friendship that transcended the barriers of species and culture. They became symbols of hope and unity, living proof that even the most unlikely of allies could find common ground and work together for the greater good. But Max and Thrax knew that their work was far from over. The scars left by the void's onslaught ran deep, and there were still many challenges to be faced in the years ahead. There were those who sought to exploit the chaos and uncertainty of the post-war era for their own gain, those who would seek to tear down the fragile peace that had been so hard won. And so Max and Thrax continued to fight, not with weapons and ships, but with words and ideas. They worked to build bridges between the various species, to foster understanding and cooperation where once there had been only fear and mistrust. They negotiated treaties and trade agreements, brokered peace deals and alliances, always striving to put the needs of the many above the desires of the few. As the years passed, the galaxy began to heal. The wounds left by the void slowly began to fade, and a new sense of purpose and unity took hold. The allied species, once so disparate and divided, now worked together as one, their shared experiences and sacrifices binding them together in a way that nothing else could. And through it all, Max and Thrax remained at the center of it all, their friendship a constant reminder of what could be achieved when individuals put aside their differences and work towards a common goal. They faced challenges and setbacks, moments of doubt and despair, but they never wavered in their commitment to each other and to the cause of peace. In the end, their legacy was one that would endure for generations to come. The story of the human and the Zorgon who had defied all expectations, who had forged an unbreakable bond in the face of impossible odds, became the stuff of legend. It was a tale that inspired countless others to follow in their footsteps, to seek out new alliances and partnerships, to work towards a brighter, more united future. And as Max and Thrax looked back on their journey together, they couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. From the first tentative moments of their friendship, to the heat of battle against the Void, to the long and difficult work of rebuilding, they had been through so much together. And yet, through it all, their bond had only grown stronger, a testament to the power of understanding and the enduring strength of the ties that bind us all. As they stood together, watching the stars wheel overhead, Max and Thrax knew that their journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new obstacles to overcome. But they also knew that they would face them together, side by side, as they had always done. And so, with a sense of hope and purpose, they stepped forward into the future, ready to continue the work that they had begun. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be moments of darkness and doubt. But they also knew that, together, there was nothing they could not achieve, no challenge they could not overcome. And with that knowledge, they embraced the unknown, secure in the bonds of friendship and the strength of the diverse beings that made up their galaxy. For they knew that it was only through unity and cooperation that they could build a better future for all, a future where the galaxy stood as one, united in common purpose and resilient in the face of any threat.